everybody. So today I want to talk about the history of Halloween, where it originated, how it started, how it evolved into what we celebrate today. After doing my Halloween costume deep dive and learning about how Halloween costumes evolved, I wanted to look more specifically just at the Halloween tradition and celebrations, and I think I learned some pretty interesting stuff, so let's just dive right in. So we can't talk about Halloween without talking about Samhain. Halloween originated from Samhain, which was a Celtic festival celebrated by lighting bonfires and wearing costumes to ward off spirits and fairies. They believed this was the time when the barrier between the spirit world and the physical world would break down and dead spirits could rise again. Samhain is the midpoint between the fall equinox and the winter solstice, and the Celts believed it to be the most important out of the 4 annual fire festivals. So during the ancient traditions of celebration, people would go out to harvest, and while they were out, they would allow their fires at home to die out. After the harvest was complete, they lit a giant community bonfire where they burned crops and, sadly, animal sacrifices. And after the prayers, they took flame from the bonfire to bring home to reignite their fires at home. This was meant to keep them safe and protected during the upcoming cold winter months. This was a mandatory celebration lasting 3 days and 3 nights, and failure to appear was believed to result in punishment from the gods. Because they believed that spirits could enter the physical world at this time, they dressed up like monsters or animals to protect themselves. There are other ancient European traditions where people would dress up in costume for Halloween. This was pretty much widely believed to be the time when dead spirits could cross over into the physical world, or ghosts could, so people would wear masks to conceal their identities and also to try to kind of trick the spirits into thinking that they were one of them and leave them alone. Throughout the Middle Ages, Samhain and other fire festivals evolved to just be kind of smaller, more personal fires closer to the farms rather than one big community celebration. This is when we start to see the first version of jack-o'-lanterns. They came from an Irish myth about a man named Stingy Jack who played a trick on the devil, and in return he was cursed to roam the earth with only a piece of coal burning inside of a turnip to light his way. So people would make their own versions of Jack's lanterns and carve scary faces into turnips and other vegetables. And later the Irish switched to using pumpkins as we know today. And as the Christians tend to do, they attempted to appropriate Samhain and make it into their own thing. Pope Gregory III designated November 1st to be All Saints' Day, to celebrate the saints, I guess. All Saints' Day was also known as All Hallows or All Hallow Moss. It came from a Middle English word that I don't know how to say this. It's like All Hallow Mess. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It just means All Saints' Day. So October 31st, which was the night before All Saints' Day or All Hallows, was known as All Hallows' Eve, or Halloween. Obviously, the Christians failed at erasing Samhain, so the pagan aspects of the celebration stuck around, and over time kind of mixed together with what the Irish traditions were as well. Trick-or-treating is thought to have come from Irish or Scottish practices, so they used to do this thing called mummying, where they would just dress up in costume, go door to door and sing songs to the dead, and in return they were given cakes. Halloween pranks or tricks also originated from Samhain, but back then it was all blamed on fairies. There were also English celebrations of All Saints' Day where poor people would visit the homes of more wealthy people and they would receive pastries called soul cakes in exchange for prayers for the dead, and eventually children took up the practice and just went door to door asking for gifts. As customs of European groups and Native Americans began to mix together, a distinctly American version of Halloween emerged, and it would be larger community gatherings. They would sing and dance, they would try to tell each other's fortunes, they would tell ghost stories. Halloween was extremely limited in certain parts of America due to Protestant beliefs, so Halloween was a lot more popular in the southern colonies. But by the end of the 19th century, America was getting millions of Irish immigrants who were bringing their traditions over and helping to popularize Halloween nationally. When the Irish came to America, they celebrated as they did back in Ireland, and that involved pulling pranks. So they would do things like putting livestock on top of barns, they would pull out crops, they would tip over outhouses, and generally just kind of cause a lot of mischief and vandalism. Eventually the vandalism became very common during Halloween. Something I found interesting was that in the late 1800s, there was kind of a push to turn Halloween into something about just more community gathering and less about like the superstitious or religious element. So they were really trying to take like the frightening aspect out of Halloween, and so Halloween parties became the most common way to celebrate the holiday. They would play games, they would dress in festive costumes, and they would eat the seasonal foods in the harvest. I don't know, when you look at some of those costumes back in the day, those were like really scary, and I know they didn't have a lot to work with, but like they were like really fucking creepy costumes. I don't know. But I found that interesting because I think that that was the turning point from it being more of like a religious celebration with like Samhain, All Saints Day, and into more of just like a community thing that everyone can enjoy, you know? But anyway, back to the timeline. So during the Great Depression, Halloween vandalism got so bad, and it was kids and teens doing it, and it was definitely most likely exacerbated just by the dire economic situation they were in. But the vandalism got so bad that the adults started trying to think of ways to keep kids occupied on Halloween to avoid vandalism. So during the Great Depression, Halloween evolved into a holiday for the young. Parents would organize haunted houses, and the old practice of trick-or-treating was revived at the time. This was a good way for the entire community to celebrate the holiday, and it was a good way for families to avoid tricks being played on them by giving kids treats. So by the 50s, mass-produced Halloween costumes became much more affordable. I get into that a lot more in depth in my Halloween costume video if you're interested. But kids had a safe way to celebrate the holiday, and now they could be their favorite character for Halloween, and it became just like a really exciting thing for everybody involved. So then in the 70s and 80s, we got the classic slasher films, which made Halloween or like Halloween themed or Halloween time movies a huge success. And eventually we got more family-friendly movies, which are my favorites, like Hocus Pocus and Nightmare Before Christmas. And so watching like Halloween movies during the Halloween time became a tradition for many people. In 1974, a Texas man named Ronald O'Brien gave cyanide-laced pixie sticks to his own son and 4 other kids. The other kids didn't end up eating the candy, but his son Timothy, who was 8 years old, died from it. So because of that, there was immediate mass fear about Halloween candy and the safety of it. I read that during that time, hospitals were offering free x-rays so their parents could bring in their children's candy to get it looked at before they were allowed to eat it. And what I found out was that these types of attacks, they were very, very rare. When they did happen, it was mostly always the children's own parents that tried to poison or harm them. So now, in retrospect, we can all kind of see that the fear was a little bit overblown, but for the time, this was such a big deal. So this happened in 1974, and when I would go trick-or-treating in like the mid to late 90s, which was 20 years later, I still needed to have my candy inspected, at least when I was like a lot younger. I remember hearing about this, and like, I don't know if it's a big deal anymore. I don't go trick-or-treating anymore. Obviously, I don't have kids, so I don't know if it's a big deal anymore, but this was like a huge Halloween thing for a long time. Honestly, I don't feel like Halloween has evolved too much since then. When I try to look up any kind of unique Halloween history from 1980 to like 2020, I don't really find anything. When I read about what Halloween was like, even like in the 70s, it honestly sounds really similar to how we celebrate today. Parties, trick-or-treating, gatherings, candy, costumes. The only like notable difference I think would be the costumes, but Halloween costume trends evolve with cultural trends. So costume trends are always going to change, but as far as the celebration goes, it's very similar. The only other thing I can think of that is like a huge difference is the obvious one. The elephant in the room, COVID, has thrown a giant wrench into everybody's celebrations, not just for Halloween. I don't know if I see COVID affecting how people celebrate Halloween forever. If anything, I think it would have an effect on us in that, like, when it is safe to have large gatherings again, I feel like we're gonna go all out and we're not gonna have like little small parties. We're gonna have like giant, huge community parties, kind of like how it used to be. But I don't know. We can only imagine. So yeah, that's what I found out about Halloween's history. It has a very rich history. I definitely found out a lot of fun facts, a lot of just like little details that I didn't add to this because I didn't want it to be so long and boring like a history lesson. I wanted to include the things that I thought were the most relevant or the most interesting, but I don't know, I can expand on this at some point too. Let me know your favorite part about Halloween. Mine is the costumes and the makeup and the transformations. That is my absolute favorite part of Halloween. I plan my costume months in advance and I just love that. I also just love the general spooky vibes too. Let me know what else you want to see from me. I post twice a week here, so subscribe if you want to see more. All of my other social media will be linked down below if you want to be friends. Let's be friends, and as always, I just want to say thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!